Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dager, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Alan Bustamante. Alan is the founder of Xcelerate Partners in Cincinnati, Ohio, and has been helping organizations adopt value-driven and innovative software development practices through his work as a trainer and a coach. He has personally trained hundreds of software professionals on agile software development, scaled agile frames, and IBM Rational Unified Process. Alan is active with the Agile community, where I first was introduced to him through his work at Agile Cincinnati. Alan, I'd like to welcome you, and Agile Cincinnati has a very active membership. Back then, is it still that way?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And first of all, Joe, thank you very much for bringing me onto your podcast. This is a great privilege and an honor. I really appreciate this. Yeah, so absolutely. So Agile Cincinnati has grown tremendously since I joined way back in 2010. My wife and I moved to Cincinnati area in 2010, and as part of her job, she's a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital here. And I think back then we were fortunate to get maybe 10 people to a meeting. We didn't really have a lot of coordination and what I would say organization around building the group. So one of the things I did is when I came in is to get the group a little bit better organized. And just in the last, I'd say couple of years maybe, we've been getting around 30 to 40 people in attendance at our meetings, which is great. And it's a great diverse audience. So in the beginning we were getting, pretty much the same people. Now we're getting, people from all different backgrounds and different people at different meetings, and really trying to find that sweet spot of finding the programs that matter most to our members. And the last time I checked in our membership database, we were up to 850 names, almost 850 names. So that's really exciting.
Wow.
But I have to say, Joe, that this would not have been possible at all without the people that are on the leadership team. People like Peg Haustetter, Levent Gore, Stephen Wagner, Peter Windler, Don Miller, and just recently Diana, who has come onto our leadership team. And so I just want to give them a shout out because the organization would not be where it is today without them.
That's nice of you to do that, and it's a fantastic group. The people I was there were very engaging when I was there and talking back and forth, and glad to hear that it is. It's one of the more popular Agile communities that I know of, and Cincinnati doesn't necessarily seem to be the hotbed of software. What's going on?
Oh yeah. So what's been great about it is so now we're venturing into new territory. So the last meeting we had an open space where one of our newest leadership members Diana had brought a lot of different individuals together to do an open space, and that was new for us, and we saw a different group of people coming for that. So some people want to come and sit for a presentation, others want to they want to come and be active and network and be involved and engaged. It used to be said that when I started, that Cincinnati was 10 years behind Columbus. But I think, since we've really seen Agile Cincinnati explode, we've shrunk that distance. I think, we're probably on par or getting there. I know personally there's several organizations here in the Cincinnati area that are very interested in Agile adoption. I'm part of one of those. So it's a very exciting time for Cincinnati.
Now, you just ventured out on your own a few years back. Can you kind of give me the elevator speech on Xcelerate Partners?
So I always find it challenging when people ask me about that because I see a lot of great things happening right now. And what I really like to tell people is that we're about helping organizations build better products and doing that through making good software teams, better software development teams. And I would say that's probably the best way to describe it. I'm working with a client right now that's got many teams that we're helping along the Agile path, and they're all great people, or they're all very good software developers, but the value add that we're providing is helping them bring better organization and better value so that they can serve their customers, not only external but internal customers as well, in a better way.
What prompted you to venture out? Was there like a life changing event or anything, or was it just time?
Actually, I would say I wouldn't say a life-changing event as much as it was my wife, who I love near and dear, and we are celebrating our fifth anniversary today, which is an exciting time for both of us. So I have to say she's been my biggest champion in this, and she's in the last few years, she's really seen the need for the services that I've been providing. So on the training, but also on the coaching level. Shortly after we moved here, I joined a small software company, and I had just left there, and she just asked me one day, you have all these people asking for your skill set. Why don't you look at going on your own and trying that out and see how it works for you? And I did that, and that was at the end of 2012, and I haven't looked back. It's been a great experience, and I got to say, every year's been a better year. So I can't expect that, of course, every year, but since the inception of Xcelerate Partners, it's been good, very good. So I have to really just recognize that my wife, has been my biggest champion, and she's really the reason why Xcelerate Partners is here today. So
That's pretty exciting. That's neat to
yeah.
hear. Well, Al, I assume that most of your work has been with, let's say, agile software developers, and that. What are some of the key areas that you help with?
So I don't actually write the code anymore. I'm more on the process side. And I find where I'm most effective is really helping organizations trim the waste. So you're a lean guy, you understand, the seven wastes and all that. And, those might be things like, a waste might be excessively long meetings or developing chunks of work in large batches. So that's really the value add, is where I come in and help them, find ways to reduce batch size. So to be more tangible about it, instead of delivering an increment of software in, let's say, 6 months or a year, they're doing it in as short a time as 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. That's one of the big things. And then also teaching effective communication skills and facilitation skills, helping them to develop that continuous improvement mindset.
Have you found it takes an outside person looking in to be able to do that, or do you have to kind of quickly become part of the team and a facilitator, as a team member? I mean, how does that work a little bit?
I think that's the value for having someone from the outside coming in is, these are people who they're not ingrained into the day-to-day political structure, organizational structure of the business. And so, someone with my background can come in, and I've worked with, well, you said in the intro, right? In the last 14 years or so, I've worked in many organizations, both as an employee and as a consultant in many different industries. And so I can bring that experience in and take a look at processes and kind of see where the gaps are and help them be more effective. A lot of companies think that they're so complex, right? They have, well, we're too complex. Well, I see my job as helping them reduce complexity. I don't think, no matter where you go, software development is software development. Certainly there are unique circumstances, and when a company's smaller versus a larger organization and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, we're still writing code and we're still pushing that out to some customer, whether it's an internal or external customer. And so that's what I like to do, is to really come in and help these organizations simplify their mode operations. And it helps to be an external partner in that, because if I'm internal, then and I've seen this before, and part of what I help organizations do is transition a lot of the work that I'm doing today to internal people. But it's always good to have that external eye, because then they're not involved in the structure. I don't have to worry about reporting into someone who is my bonuses or my raise is going to be affected by a decision I make or a recommendation that I make. So I'm totally disconnected from that. And I think that's really the power of having someone who's external to the organization come in and help the organization through these changes. And one of the things that I always like to ask organizations is when they say they want to go through an agile adoption or transformation or whatever you want to call it, they want to become more agile or develop more agility. Why? Why do they want to do that? Because it's, especially for larger organizations, it's a big change. It takes a big responsibility to do that, and it does require money, obviously, because more often than not, you need to bring in external consultants to help the organization through that change.
I thought all software teams are agile now, so some are still not. What are the ones that aren't?
You would think that, right? So I've talked to a lot of people coming out of college that are coming into these organizations, and to them, they're learning this stuff. It's like this is stuff that they're learning in school. We were joking the other day about how some of the other professionals that I work with in my business, we were talking about next, I don't know, 10 years, we'll probably all be out of jobs, or hopefully at least the smarter of us will probably be on to the next thing, whatever that is. But a lot of these kids coming out of college now, they're coming with that mindset. Like they're telling us, oh yeah, we've already learned about Scrum or Kanban or all this other stuff. But there's still a big base of people who have not gone through this, any kind of training or adoption or coaching. A lot of organizations that have not, and often what I find is that organizations, they may send someone to a class or maybe a team to a class, but then and those people get all jazzed up about agility, and then they come back to the organization and they hit the politics or the organizational structure that slaps them back down. And so they sort of they kind of adopt a few things, like maybe they adopt I don't know, a daily scrum or a stand-up that's 15 minutes, but they're not really living the values and the principles of agility. It's some of the things that we talked about earlier, right? Like continuous improvement and building a close relationship with the customer, those kinds of things. So a long way to go, I think. It's sort of this false sense of agility that companies will have. They think they want to boil it down to a process, and we'll just pick up the process and we'll be agile. But then when they dig deep into it and they find out that things aren't changing, and then they bring someone in like myself to look at what they're doing, and we go, well, I might say, well, yeah, okay, so you're doing a 15-minute stand-up or something, but really you're not living those values of that open dialogue, the communication, the continuous improvement, building a trustful and transparent environment. We want people to be able to bring issues to the forefront. Just like in lean, right? The pull the line or pull the cord scenario where anyone can stop the line in order to fix an issue. We want that, and many of the large organizations that I've been in, of course, that hasn't been the mindset. It's been more of a shoot the messenger type mindset. So I think there's a lot of work to do there. There's a saying out there, agile in name only, but a lot of organizations that have not started down the path, a lot of organizations that have started down the path but have this false sense of agility. And then there are obviously case studies out there which I think has helped our progress in the agile industry. Companies that have been very successful. They're doing all the right things, not only on the technical side, but also on the people side. People, very, very important component of agile adoption for sure.
We see that throughout the industry. Every organization is agile these days. So you kind of alluded to it there a little bit, okay, in your conversation. And how has that affected your work? Are other parts of the organization saying, "Oh, we all need to have daily stand-ups"? I mean, are they taking the tools and maybe not some of that real agile spirit?
Yeah. So I think the great thing about what I'm doing right now at a current client is it's more than just working with the software professionals. It's organizational change is what it is, and these opportunities don't come along very often where you get to affect change across the organization. So sales and marketing and human resources, and all those require different skill sets. Most of my background is working with the software development folks and product folks, because any agile transformation is going to require the business lines talking to the engineers. That without a doubt is critical to successful agile adoption. But then you've got, in an organizational change initiative, you've got other areas that may not even really touch engineering, but they're still interested, such as human resources. Really want to bring in a lot of those lean concepts. And so we have specialists that can come in and help those individuals out. But yeah, I think a lot of the focus is on results, right? We want to be able to see results from the changes. And I've seen this time and time again where even teams, like I would say the intangible results are they're talking more to each other. They've got very high morale. They see what other teams are doing and they're like, hey, I want that agile stuff. I want to be more agile like these other teams. I'm hearing such great things about it. These guys are going out and celebrating together, and they're seeing the results of their work much sooner. No one wants to be on a project where they don't see the end result until 6 months down the road, or a year, in the most likely scenario, a year down the road, and nobody knows what that's going to look like. And then it's a slow slog towards that end result. So when other teams see teams that are delivering something in a matter of a couple to a few weeks worth of time, and then they're celebrating those successes, then that just builds within the organization, and over time, you see other areas of companies wanting to embark on the same journey, and that's where you get into things like sales and human resources and those areas. But yeah, we bring people in that can help in those areas. So yeah, but I think you have to start with results first. More often than not, someone like myself or one of my colleagues would be brought in to work with the engineering and the product side of the house, and then that would just proliferate over time to other areas of the organization. But it's exciting to watch. I probably see that less, that where it gets into places like marketing, sales, HR, less than I would like. But it's a great thing to see when it starts to happen, when I do get those opportunities.
When I present lean, let's say to sales and marketing, I always start with the people and say, what's the reason that you want to have lean in sales and marketing? I mean, what's the business reason? Because they always seem that, we're a lean organization, we want that, and we need to get rid of the waste in sales and marketing. But
Right.
typically there isn't a good business reason to do that. Do you see the same thing when we coin that word agile, okay, to go to the other parts of the organization? Do they really recognize that they have to have a business reason, okay, to be
So
doing it? Or how does that work?
so yeah, what I guess the one thing I would highlight is that we're in a great time of change. And every year it seems to be that you're having to be more responsive to that change. What the market is dictating. I think in the past the changes have been slower, and the ability to meet those changes have been slower. And now the organization is having to respond to that change, and that's probably the biggest factor I would say that I've seen in being able to get lean into other areas. The word agile to me is just part of the big thing of agile, or agility, is responding to change. That's why you're agile. The market dictates one thing, you have to react to it in some way. And how long does it take you to react to that? We're seeing that across the board in all types of industries, where the barriers to entry have been really high, and now you have got some upstarts coming in and challenging the status quo. The example I would cite there, which is in the current industry that I'm working in with a client, the startup Square. They're impacting the payments industry, and large organizations are having to respond to that. They're making acquisitions to be able to respond to that. But internally they don't have the capability to do that, and that hits all. They don't have internally. They don't have the capability, so they go out and acquire a company to be able to address a market need. But I think the word agile to me is, I like the word. I hear it a lot, not even in reference to software development or anything. That I don't think agile is really tied to any one specific industry or business. It's a great word to describe how someone or some organization is going to respond to change. And like I said, we're in a time and place in this world where we're having to be, people and organizations are having to be very responsive because things are changing so quickly. The technologies are changing, the way and that companies talk to their customers and service their customers is changing. Yeah, I think it's a great time to be using the word agile or agility and introducing that word into other areas of the business.
I have to ask you, is it just maybe for clarification, especially for non-agile practitioners, is that agile doesn't mean that I just walk in each morning and see what's laying on my desk and respond to immediately the last phone call, does it? I mean, how agile do I need to be?
Right. Yeah. So that's another great question, because I think of, and I apologize because I can't think of who coined the phrase, but there's this saying in agile development called last most responsible moment. So we're going to delay things until the last most responsible moment. So that doesn't mean there's no value in planning. It just means we're going to make decisions when it is the last moment that's not going to destroy us or put us at a negative risk, because it acknowledges that change, that perpetual change that's always happening. Think of agile planning as that last most responsible moment. Planning very small chunks of time. So instead of we're planning something out for 6 months to a year, let's plan maybe a few weeks at a time up to, and this is what I'm working on with organization right now, is looking at maybe up to a quarter's worth of work, but not really saying that this is a fixed scope of work, but at least giving some foresight and some amount of planning into the organization so that they can see what the roadmap looks like. Along the way, we want to make sure that the organization has room to make pivots and course corrections. Going back, I wouldn't say that there's no planning, because you need to be able to plan something to coordinate effectively. Because all these projects, whatever, I mean, unless you're a one person team or organization, you're going to have to coordinate with somebody. And oftentimes, especially within large organizations, we're talking there may be dozens of people coordinating on a single initiative. And that requires planning. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to plan out a year in advance, but you're going to need several weeks, maybe a couple of months, 2 to 3 months worth of look ahead time to see where the group is going. So planning is definitely necessary, without a doubt. Agile does not mean no planning. There needs to be enough planning to coordinate people and get everything aligned, but doing that up until the last most responsible moment so that the organization can make those changes and pivot whenever the market demands it.
In my idea, what you're saying is we do still put that roadmap out there. We still do the scope kind of that and that vision, okay, of where we're going with the project. But then as things are farther out, they're less granular, and as we bring them in closer, we start putting granularity to it as we get closer to the last responsible moment. Would that be a good way to put it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Because from today, looking out, I don't know, 3 months from now, yes, it's much less granular, and we don't want to put a lot of effort in getting too granular at the, let's say the 3 month mark. That would be a waste. That would be a waste of time to get too granular, because the expectation, we're already coming into this process with the expectation that things are going to change. we know they're going to change, and it's hard to, we put a lot of effort into sizing things or discussing things at a very granular level down 3 months from for things that are going to happen 3 months from now. Then it's much harder to let go of those plans because we put so much time and money into them. The art of agile development, part of the art, I should say, because there's many sayings and out there, but part of the art is embracing change. Embrace change. And the less vested time and money we have vested into that detailed planning for 3 months or 6 months or a year from now, the easier it's going to be for us to embrace that change. So yeah, so more granular upfront for the near term things. That'll give us an idea of how much we need to invest and how many people, how much equipment, whatever we need to put to an initiative in the short term, and then in the long term, getting a sense for that as well, but only focusing at a granular level in the immediate short term, which is a few weeks out.
Is that one of the big challenges of adapting agile at scale? I mean, even for an organization just outside of software, is to have that mindset to kind of leave some fuzziness out there, out there in the future.
One of the big differences, of course, is sheer size, right? So a small team can come in and maybe I'm there for a few weeks and working, doing some training, and then I'm coaching, which is I'm working with the teams directly in a one-to-one mode or one-to-many mode. I always say that coaches are going to they're going to teach for one, right? They're going to mentor and then they're going to model, or even I would say probably model first and then mentor the behaviors, because just teaching isn't enough. You need the coaching in there to be able to support the change. So, like I said earlier, a lot of times companies will want to send people to training, and then they expect the change to happen by bringing them back into the organization and sharing what they've learned. But that is often not a recipe for success. I would say 9 times out of 10, you're going to probably need a coach. You will need a coach coming in to help model the behaviors. Now that the team's been trained, modeling some of the behaviors, and doing the mentorship. And with a small team let's say one small team of 7 to 8 people, or maybe you've got a few teams around that size, that could be done over several weeks to a few months. With scale, now we're talking much more complex organization, because we're talking a large team of small teams. So teams of teams, as some people say. So now we're talking an initiative that has maybe 40, 50, upwards of 100 people delivering on it, and having multiple numbers of those. But also the technology stack is much more broad and deep. So you've got a broader, deeper technology stack. You've also got challenges with third-party vendors. So a lot of large organizations are dealing with not just internal employees and one or two other vendors. So insert name of XYZ consulting company, but they've probably got maybe 5 to 10 core vendors that are serving them by helping them staff their projects with software developers, engineers, testing, and those kinds of things. And their own internal processes are different often than the customers. My customers' internal processes. So now I'm coming in and helping my customer, but then at the same time I've got to help the vendor's customers, because that's part of the compact or the contract, I should say, for bringing a organization into the agile development world. In fact, I had someone ask me the other day, why are we even training these folks? Training their partners, right? Their vendors. And I said, well, that's just part of the deal. These people are part of the team. When I come in, I don't just train your employees. If you have vendors or partners that are on those teams, they need to be trained too. That's how you build an agile development team, because it's one team. There is no your team members and the vendors team members. They're all one team. So that's a challenge. And then just the sheer just distribution. Oftentimes at scale, one large organization here in Cincinnati, who I'm no longer helping, but had helped a couple of years ago. We had a product owner in Germany. We had software engineers in Bangalore, India. We had testing in China. I had one test lead in Canada. And then trying to orchestrate that group of people around agile development, which requires a lot of close contact and communication and transparency. And that must have been the product owner worked for the client, for my client, and the testing was one vendor, the development was another vendor. So you might imagine the complex scenarios of scaling agility to much larger organizations there. And it requires a lot of different tools and techniques to be able to manage that.
You know what we've left out of this conversation a little bit, okay, and it's probably a great place to end it, okay, is the role of leadership in developing an agile organization. In Lean, we always think that leadership needs to be on board, and we don't talk about just being on board. We're talking about they need to be at Gemba. They need to be practicing Lean themselves, okay? And you know, as I always put it, you got to be on the same boat and in the middle of the lake with one of the oars, okay? Badly.
Sure.
How does that work in Agile? Can I just say, oh, we're going to become Agile. You guys are Agile. You know, go get trained to be Agile.
Yeah, and you mentioned one of the key words that I like to use, which is the Gemba, right? Going to the Gemba, as they say in Lean, and I've been very vocal about that. Leadership, to answer your question more directly, leadership absolutely plays a critical role in this. And it doesn't mean that they are necessarily following some process, as, you know, like Scrum, for example, or Kanban or whatever. It doesn't mean that they're following a process necessarily, as much as they're exhibiting the ability to lead knowledge workers, because that's the domain I'm in. And I would say even in manufacturing these days, you really have to be a skilled worker to work in a manufacturing plant now with all the technology, because a lot of this stuff is done by robots and machines that are using computers to drive them. So it's this high-tech manufacturing that's been the word that's been tossed around a lot. And so in those cases now we're seeing, almost every type of worker across multiple industries, and certainly in my industry in software, that you're working with knowledge workers, and those need to be handled. Those workers need to be treated as like, that they are the ones with the knowledge. They are the ones who are providing the expertise. They're living, breathing, thinking individuals. And so it's less about a process, I think, for leadership, as it is understanding how to lead those knowledge workers. So one of the things that I do emphasize with my customers at the leadership level is, and of course we have trainings that we take leadership through. One of my colleagues, Skip Angel, he just created a class called Agile for Leaders for our client, and it's a great class, and it talks a lot about personality styles and servant leadership, and that's great. And I think all leaders, any lean thinking leader, needs to go through some sort of training to understand how to better lead knowledge workers. It's not as in the old days, was it Frederick Winslow Taylor who believed in more of a directive approach, and a lot of our management styles have come from that old mentality, whenever that was, in the early 1900s, I think, of directive style management. Whereas now leading, we're saying it's less about directing and more about facilitating and making sure leaders are serving or leading through serving. So removing blockers and making a work environment that's enjoyable for their people, and trusting them to do the work in a good way, and to provide value and a quality product, and really just facilitating their needs. So a lot of what or part of that is going back to what you said about the Gemba. When I'm working with leaders, yeah, they do the training, but then also I try to get them to go out and go to the Gemba, go out to where the work is done, even at the senior leadership levels. And I've had people say, well, geez, my day's so busy already. You can't really expect me to go to every single team and see what they're looking at or working on. And I tell them, I say, I'm not telling you or asking you to do that every single day, but maybe once a month, you pick a team, or once a week, or however often you feel like you can dedicate to this. Some is better than none, and try it. Maybe you go visit a team once a month, and if you find it enjoyable and it's very productive and the teams enjoy it, which I'm sure they will, then maybe you do it once every couple of weeks and just an experiment. But taking that attitude of going to the Gemba and seeing where the work is done and talking to the people who are on the floor. It doesn't have to be a manufacturing floor. It could be the people who are building that software product, and talking to them and finding out where are their struggles, how can they as leaders help improve their business, by improving the environment that their people are working in. So, and part of that is also encouraging this idea of open communication and transparency, because a lot of organizations that I go into, they they have this like the mentality, or the culture, if you will, which is a big part of what I do when I'm working with these other coaches, is to help change the culture, changing it so that they're not in this shoot the messenger mode, which is unfortunately a lot of organizations that we see. And part of the reason I stay employed, right, is because these organizations are somewhat dysfunctional. But getting them to change their culture so that it's not to shoot the messenger, but to embrace that openness and transparency. And that's, to me, is what lean leadership is that serving through leading through serving, creating that open, transparent environment so people can feel comfortable coming to them and talking about the issues without having this fear that it's going to affect their next raise or bonus, or being shot, or they're going to be given the pink slip, and those kinds of things. But yes, absolutely. I find leadership is absolutely critical. A lot of organizations start from the bottom. They start to change from the bottom, and that works for a little bit. But the rocks that have to be moved at the bottom level, or I guess what I'll say is the rocks that can be moved are really the small rocks. It requires leadership to come in from the top to help support and move the big rocks. And so absolutely, we need leadership, much more leadership training and coaching out there we need more than I see today, but definitely a key component.
I saw one of the things that Benson of Personal Kanban wrote about one time, and he talked about a Kanban boardwalk. Okay, of walking down the boards and everything. And I thought, what a leadership walk, right? Is to walk down in front of all those Kanban boards and experience a daily meeting once a week, or something like that. You didn't have to. You didn't have to go in there and say, "Oh, we need to be doing this, doing this." Just listen to the daily meeting in front of a Kanban board, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly leaders can adopt those processes for managing the flow of work. And I know I do help leaders with that as well. And a part of adopting Agile at scale is controlling the funnel of work that's coming in and flowing down to the teams, and at the portfolio level. Often that requires some sort of view into the organization, the amount of project work or the initiatives that are being created. And yeah, absolutely, that kind of tooling, having the board, being able to look at the board and then discuss with anybody that's considered a stakeholder, for sure.
I could go on and talk to you for hours here, Alan, and I do appreciate your time here. But lots of exciting things are happening in your household, okay? But tell us what's on the horizon professionally for Alan and Xcelerate Partners.
So thank you for asking, Joe. So for right now, I would say my plate is actually pretty full with what I've got going on, which is a great place to be in. But I think looking to the future, and certainly into next year as we close out 2015, hard to believe, can't believe we're at the end of 2015 already. But yeah, I think the next thing I want to tackle is I want to start, and this might sound crazy, but I want to start recording some online classes. I've been taking a few myself, and there's a lot of content delivery services out there. So my next venture is to see if I can put some courses out online. And I think I've got the content. The key for me, I think, is finding a partner who can help me to communicate that message in a creative and an engaging way. So I've taken some classes that have been very, very engaging, and even though they're online, they keep my interest. And I've taken some that have been so-so. And I think that probably is going to require some coaching for myself on that part, is because I think you have to definitely have a good personality to be able to pull those kinds of things off and make it interesting. But I'd eventually like to be able to create a class or classes online and then be able to sell them through some content delivery network. But that would be next on the horizon for me as my next goal as far as Xcelerate Partners.
Okay, well that sounds awful exciting, okay? And it's a lot of work, okay? I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Before you go too far down that path, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, maybe you and I can talk more about that.
Okay,
Get your shared experience.
Yeah, we will sometime here. So, what's the best way for someone to contact you and learn more about Alan?
Well, you can catch me on the web. So my company is Xcelerate Partners, but that's with an X. So it's X as in Xavier, CELERATE partners.com. Or you could go to increaseagility.com, and that would take you to my company's website. And then you can also reach me via email by my first name, Alan, ALAN, at XceleratePartners.com.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for listening. This podcast will be available on the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 website. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Joe.